Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're diving deep into a painful truth so many of you have silently struggled with: why he never contacts you, even when every part of him might still crave you. This isn't about blaming yourself or begging for answers. It's about understanding the psychology behind his silence, and more importantly, reclaiming your power, self-worth, and dignity after heartbreak. If you've ever found yourself wondering why someone who once seemed so invested can disappear like you never mattered, then this message is for you. This is your moment to stop waiting and start rising. Let's get into it. You might be sitting there wondering how someone who once held you so close, someone who lit up at the sound of your voice, could now vanish into silence. Even while, deep down, you know he still feels something for you. Here's what I need you to understand. Craving isn't the same as action. Just because someone wants you doesn't mean they're going to do what it takes to have you. We often confuse longing with love, desire with devotion. But a man can desperately crave you and still do absolutely nothing about it. Why? Because craving doesn't require courage. It's a feeling. It lives in the background of his life. It shows up at 1 a.m. when he scrolls through old photos or when he hears a song that reminds him of you. That ache he feels, it's real, but it's not enough, because acting on that ache, picking up the phone, confronting the hurt, owning up to how he may have failed you, that takes something more. It takes bravery. It takes humility. And it takes a willingness to disrupt the comfortable little cocoon he's built to protect his ego. A man can want you and still stay silent, because silence is safer. He doesn't have to risk rejection. He doesn't have to hear that you've moved on. He doesn't have to face the possibility that you're no longer waiting. So instead, he lives in that craving. It becomes his comfort zone. And ironically, the more he craves you, the more afraid he becomes to act on it. Because the stakes feel higher. The fear of what he might lose now overshadows the love he once had the chance to nurture. Here's the painful truth. Sometimes his silence isn't because you weren't enough. It's because he wasn't. And it's easier to fantasize about you than it is to rise to the version of himself that would deserve you. So he sits in the craving. He rewatches your stories. He tells himself he'll reach out when the time is right, but the time never feels right, because healing isn't comfortable. Accountability isn't comfortable. Growth isn't comfortable. And the biggest mistake you could make is believing that his silence means he doesn't feel anything. No, he might feel everything. But feelings alone don't build relationships. Actions do. And craving you in silence isn't love. It's fear wrapped in longing. It's easier for him to imagine you from afar than to step into your world and risk discovering you no longer need him the way he wants to be needed. So if you've been sitting there wondering, why hasn't he contacted me if he misses me? Maybe it's not that he doesn't miss you. Maybe it's that craving you is simply easier than becoming the man who's worthy of you. And that's not your burden to carry. One of the hardest things to accept is that someone can care about you, want you, even miss you deeply, and still choose not to reach out. And what's even more confusing is knowing that he's struggling with that silence just as much as you are, maybe even more. But here's where things get really real. Reaching out would require him to be vulnerable. It would mean putting his pride aside, lowering the walls he's built, and saying, I still care, or I was wrong. And for some people, especially those who have spent their lives protecting their ego, that's terrifying. There's a battle that happens inside him, between the side of him that wants to reconnect, to be near you, and the side of him that's afraid to lose face. That ego, that armor he wears, it's not just about pride. It's about fear. Fear of being hurt again. fear of being rejected, fear of appearing weak. And for a man who's tied his worth to appearing in control, reaching out feels like surrender, like he's handing you the power now. So instead, he stays quiet. He convinces himself that silence is strength, that he's doing the right thing by staying away. But deep down, he's stuck, torn between wanting you and needing to feel safe, torn between the desire to say, I miss you, and the fear that you'll respond with, it's too late. That silence becomes his protection, but also his prison. You might wonder, if he really cared, why wouldn't he just say it? And the answer is because caring doesn't always override fear. Sometimes the fear wins. Sometimes the ego whispers that it's better to live with the what if than to risk rejection. And he tells himself that if you really wanted him, you'd make the first move. That way, he doesn't have to risk vulnerability. He doesn't have to be the one to go first. But connection doesn't grow in comfort zones. Relationships don't heal through silence. And the longer he lets the ego win, the more distance grows between you. Eventually, the space between craving and action becomes a canyon too wide to cross, all because he chose comfort over courage. He chose the illusion of control over the messy beauty of honesty. And here's the truth that hurts, but also frees you. If someone chooses their ego over the chance to be with you, they were never ready for the kind of love you offer. You deserve someone who meets you with open hands, not crossed arms. Someone who doesn't just feel something, but does something about it. Because real love doesn't hide behind pride. It shows up. There's something powerful that happens when you begin to heal, when you start putting yourself first, when your energy shifts from waiting to rising. And while you might think that would make someone want to chase you harder, often it does the exact opposite. It intimidates him, not because you did anything wrong, but because the version of you that's growing is harder for someone who's standing still to approach. In the beginning, he may have loved your softness, your availability, your willingness to give and give without asking for much in return. But as you evolve, as you learn to set boundaries, as you develop a deeper relationship with yourself, he starts to feel that shift. You're no longer the same person he knew. You've become more self-aware, more selective, more intentional with your time and heart. And that's exactly what causes him to freeze. It's not that he doesn't miss you, he does, but the new you forces him to look at himself, and that's where the problem begins. Because when someone hasn't done the work on themselves, being around someone who has becomes uncomfortable. He starts questioning, am I enough for her now? What if she sees that I haven't grown the way she has? Instead of being inspired by your strength, he feels exposed by it. You rising into your power makes his unresolved insecurities louder. He might not say it out loud, but the thought is there. She doesn't need me anymore. And that's terrifying for someone who once felt significant in your life. When a man senses that you've stepped into a new chapter, one where your worth isn't tied to his affection, one where you no longer chase crumbs, he knows that reaching out now requires more than charm or nostalgia. It requires substance. It requires effort. It requires being better than he was. So rather than step up, he stays back. Not because he doesn't care, but because the bar has been raised. And somewhere deep down, he doubts he can reach it. Your growth has made it impossible for him to come back with the same old story, the same old habits, the same half-hearted promises. And if he's not ready to grow too, then silence becomes his only move. But that silence says more about him than it ever could about you. It says he recognizes your worth, even if he can't meet it. It says he knows you're no longer someone he can return to without change. And while that might hurt, it's also a sign of your evolution. Because when your growth scares someone away, it only means you're no longer shrinking to make others comfortable. We love to believe that if someone misses us, they'll come back, that if they truly care, they'll show up eventually. And while that sounds comforting, it's often far from how things really play out. The truth is, he might think about you every day. He might even replay memories in his head over and over again, wanting to reach out, aching to fix things, but still, he doesn't do it. Not because the feelings aren't there, but because he's waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for the day he feels strong enough, confident enough, ready enough. But that perfect moment, it doesn't exist. It's a lie his mind tells him to avoid discomfort. Because reaching out means stepping into uncertainty. It means being vulnerable. It means risking hearing that you've moved on or that you're no longer interested. And so he stalls. He keeps saying, tomorrow, next week, when I feel more in control, when I've got my act together. But life doesn't wait for perfect timing, and relationships don't heal on postponed intentions. He might think he's being smart by not rushing, by waiting until he can do it right. But what he's really doing is letting fear drive the car. He's handing over the keys to doubt, insecurity, and ego. And every day he waits, the distance between you grows. The version of you he once knew is evolving. Your heart is healing, your standards are rising, your life is moving forward, and the longer he hesitates, the more he risks losing the opportunity to reconnect with someone who would have once welcomed him back with open arms. And he knows that. He knows time is slipping. That craving you in silence has become a kind of emotional torture. But still, he doesn't act, because what's going on inside him is a war between two forces: his desire to be close to you and his fear of not being received the way he wants. It's safer for him to fantasize about you than to face the possibility of rejection or disappointment. So he builds this story in his head, one where someday the stars will align and everything will feel right again. But that story is just a shield. What he doesn't understand is that the longer he waits for the right moment, the more that moment slips through his fingers. And eventually, the chance to reconnect isn't there anymore, not because you didn't care, but because you couldn't keep your life on hold for someone living in fear. You moved forward. You stopped checking your phone. You stopped hoping for a message that never came. And in doing so, you reclaimed your peace. Sometimes the window doesn't close with a slam. Sometimes it closes quietly, while someone's still convincing themselves they'll open it tomorrow. Silence isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's the only move he feels he has left to keep a sense of control. When a man pulls away and doesn't reach out, even though you know he still feels something, it's often not because he's over you. It's because silence lets him hold on to the illusion that he's still calling the shots, that in not reaching out, he somehow still has the power. You see, when a relationship ends or disconnects, the one who initiates the silence often tells himself that by staying quiet, he's staying strong, that if he doesn't contact you, it makes him look unbothered, composed, like he's got it all together. But deep down, silence is the only card he has left to play. Because if he speaks, if he reaches out and hears you've healed, or worse, that you no longer care, he risks the last bit of control he's clinging to. For many men, that illusion of control is everything. It gives them a sense of stability, even if it's built on denial. Reaching out would force him to confront the reality of the situation, what he lost, what he didn't fight for, what he may never get back. So instead, he chooses silence, not because it brings him peace, but because it keeps him safe from rejection. But here's the twist. While he's using silence to hold on to power, he doesn't realize that your silence is louder than his. Your silence is louder than his because you're not staying quiet to manipulate or protect your ego. You're staying quiet because you're growing. You're choosing peace. You've stopped chasing answers, stopped needing his validation. And that shift, it's powerful. It flips the dynamic completely. He might have expected you to keep reaching out, to check in, to wonder, to wait. But when you don't, when your silence becomes consistent, calm, and unbothered, it shakes him. Suddenly, the silence that once gave him control starts to feel like losing grip, because now he's not the one holding back, he's the one being left behind. And this is what he didn't expect, that the same silence he thought would protect his pride would eventually become the thing that highlights your strength. Your silence is different. It's not avoidance. It's clarity. It's a boundary. It's you no longer entertaining half-hearted energy. So while he thinks silence is control, what he's actually doing is watching your worth grow from a distance. And every day he stays silent, the message is clear, not just to you, but to himself, that craving someone isn't enough if you're too afraid to step forward. Because in the end, silence might give him the illusion of power, but it's costing him the one thing he truly wants: you. There's a dangerous story some people tell themselves after a breakup. A story where one day they'll come back and you'll still be there, waiting, open-hearted, ready to pick up where things left off, not because they think you're weak, but because they remember the way you once loved them, how you held space for their mess, how you forgave what others would have walked away from, how your love wrapped around their pain and tried to heal it. But here's the truth. You are not the remedy for someone else's brokenness. And if you look for it, you are not his rescue plan. He might crave you, not just because he misses you, but because life without you feels empty. Because he doesn't know how to face his own demons without the comfort of your understanding. And in his mind, reaching out might feel like reaching home. But what he's reaching for isn't just you. It's the version of you that once carried more than your share of the emotional weight. And if he hasn't changed, then his craving has nothing to do with building a real future. It's about seeking relief from discomfort, not taking responsibility for it. And I know it's tempting to think, maybe I can be what helps him grow. Maybe I'm the one who inspires his breakthrough. But let me ask you this. How long are you willing to delay your healing for someone else's potential? You cannot shrink yourself down to be someone's bandage, someone's emotional safety net, and still expect to feel whole. When someone truly wants to come back, they come back different. They come back having done the work. They come back not to be saved, but to stand beside you. If he's reaching out because he's lonely or guilty or nostalgic, but he hasn't changed, then all he's doing is dragging you back into the same cycle, the same wounds, the same emotional labor you've already done on his behalf. Your love is not meant to be a rehab center for someone who refuses to grow. Yes, you can care. Yes, you can remember the good, but you owe it to yourself not to let that care become a reason to open the door to someone who only wants to feel better, not be better. It takes strength to want someone and still choose yourself. It takes clarity to recognize that just because someone craves you doesn't mean they deserve access to you. And if he can't meet you in your wholeness, if he can't bring more than just apologies or longing, then his craving is not your problem to solve, because you were never meant to be the reason he heals. You were meant to be the standard he couldn't reach until he did.